This is an interesting interactive part of the program. We're going to talk about the Forest Opportunity Roadmap, and it's actually a pretty good segue from some of the stuff Rocky and Sage was talking about. We are trying to build markets. We're trying to figure out where Maine fits. We've been keeping you updated on the Forest Opportunity Roadmap, the 4 Maine project. And we're going to start with Bree Bowman, who's been with us at least a couple of years on this project, taking over from a previous colleague. But if you remember, this is an interesting collaboration between the Maine Development Foundation, the forest industry, including PLC, Maine Forest Products Council, the Woodlot Owners of Maine. The congressional delegation's been involved. The governor's office has been really significantly involved. Patty, as the director of the Maine Forest Service, has been plugged into this program. And it's all about finding our future markets and where do we fit in the economy. So Bree Bowman comes to us with a lot of experience in dealing with sustainability issues. She's done a marvelous job in the 2 years she's been with this project, figuring out quickly how to herd cats like John Cashwell and Dana Dorn, all of us big characters who are trying to be in control. But you've done a marvelous job of taking care of all of us. And we've got more that we want to do, and Bree's going to talk about that. She's the Senior Program Director for Maine. And then on the line is Jeff Hatcher. He is the Managing Director of Indufor North America. And he isn't able to join us today. He's got some challenges with a kindergartner, which I certainly understand, and staying close to home these days. But it's a real interesting project that he's leading as an international consultant. He is with Indufor Corporation. They're based out of Finland. Jeff is the managing director of the U.S. operations, and we've been working with them all along for about 4 years now, I think, and taking a look at global issues. And Jeff will bring you up to speed on where we stand with that project and where we need to go to keep looking at where additional markets may come from. So it's my honor to introduce Bree Bowman, and thank you for coming up.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Pat, Roberta, and Sue for putting on a great event, and for the AV staff for helping us navigate Zoom. Much appreciated. So my name's Bree Bowman. I'm a Senior Program Director at Maine Development Foundation, and I staff the 4 Maine effort. So for those of you who have been involved in 4 Maine, which as I look across the room is many of you, official permission to daydream or text or keep yourself occupied for the next 15 minutes, because I'm going to start out with the basics about the initiative, talk a little bit about how the 4 Maine collaboration has been involved in recovery and resilience planning for the state, which is something we heard the governor talk about this morning. Brief focus on the 2021 summit, which was our first kind of public event. Talk a little bit about future directions for the work, and then wrap with a brief committee report. So the heart of what we're doing right now is really market attraction and the strategic investment attraction work that Jeff will talk about after my presentation. And this will be a primer that talks about all the context and work that enables that investment attraction activity. So, as Pat mentioned, 4 Maine is a unique collaboration. It is led by industry with participation by the state, government, nonprofits, and communities, as well as a number of trade associations. So we're very indebted to the continued participation of all these partners, and really want to emphasize here that industry support is what has set us apart from other initiatives and allowed us to really ground truth and test the research that we've conducted. So phase 1 of the effort, which ran from 2017 to 2019, focused on really understanding the global context of Maine's forest products economy and what we could do as an industry to strategically shift or adapt to remain competitive. And in the second phase of the work, which is the phase we're in now, we're running a lot of research on things like how to implement and set good groundwork for all of the strategy recommendations that came out of the research of phase 1. And we've really relied on industry partners to understand things like What are your most pressing transportation and infrastructure improvement needs? What kind of workforce demand are you projecting into the future? What has your engagement with small woodland owners looked like, and how can you improve it? So just to lead by thanking folks who have been involved and encouraging continued involvement as we really rely on that industry voice to make sure that what we're doing is of benefit to the full forest products economy. So the central focus of our effort, as Pat mentioned, is really about creating new markets and establishing a strong bedrock of industry in the state in more traditional forest products markets as well. The vision is that Maine is a global leader in forest products economy with a thriving, innovative, and diverse industry that provides good jobs in vibrant Maine communities. So we know that, especially given some setbacks over the past year, this is a highly ambitious goal, but we still do believe that progress is possible towards our mission of $12 billion of economic output for the industry. Again, we see this rooted in the growth of traditional industries, which allows for diversification into new emerging products. Want to re-emphasize that we're talking about all stakeholders in the industry. So the graphic that you see up here represents kind of the circle of relationship and interactions that make the industry possible. So we have communities themselves where industry is located, the state, state agencies, and the state government, the public themselves, landowners, loggers, and mills, all participating in some fashion in the initiative. And we do have great confidence that through this collaborative approach, our vision can lead to a broad-scale success that can benefit each of the stakeholders listed here in unique ways. And again, just to really make this point, we are seeking to support existing business and pursue diversification. So much like any firm needs good core business operations to be stable and strong before they can pursue R&D activities or take risks, we think about this in the same way. We need our foundational forest products businesses in the state to be strong, to be open to reinvestment and new opportunity, alongside the pursuit of diversification through emerging products. One thing I'll note here is related to Indufor's work. The list of products spread here that you see largely results from a global market analysis that Indufor conducted in phase 1 of the work, which identified a set of priority products in which Maine could be globally competitive. And that has been sort of the guiding compass of our work, is to pursue a product set in which we know we can compete. So before I talk about some of the details of individual committee work, I want to share some examples of how For Maine has really served to advocate for the forest products economy and mainstream forest products economy themes and work into some of the ongoing conversations happening at the level of the state. So here we'll talk a little bit about how we've supported Maine's recovery, resilience, and future planning during a very unique and challenging year. So 3 of kind of the trademark examples of this include participation in the Economic Recovery Committee, integration into the Maine Climate Council's work, and partnership on the state's 10-year economic plan. So we heard the governor talk about a lot of these. I won't go into too much detail, but we'll say we owe a very deep debt of gratitude to Steve Schley and Pat for their work in assisting the governor's economic recovery efforts to ensure the inclusion of Maine's forest products economy. We heard the governor talk about relief funding, R&D funding, federal funds that have been advocated for to end up in Maine to benefit of this industry, and a lot of that groundwork was laid in the ERC conversations. Maine's Climate Council, I'm going to skip ahead and then skip back. So Maine's Climate Council, we see the forest economy represented on 5 out of 6 working groups, so really strong representation and advocacy there. And within this is kind of the major theme that we're seeking to advance, that the forest sector through For Maine is mobilizing to grow Maine's sustainable natural resource economy by $4 billion, support and expand Maine jobs, and provide solutions that help Maine achieve its climate and environmental goals. So really framing the forest products economy as a win for Maine's economy and environment. And the work that we're doing in committees backs this up. do want to take a moment to pause and acknowledge that a lot of the lessons that we have learned during COVID have validated Maine's approach. There's quite a list here, but I want to point out a few. The first is that market diversity is needed for resilience and strength. The other is that operating resiliency provides economic insurance to Maine's economy, and that a manufacturing base located in North America provides economic security. Lastly, that establishing and communicating a plan is key to the future of Maine's forest economy. And this is where I think Maine has really been of a great assistance to the ongoing success of the industry and its ability to establish and communicate a plan for what the future can hold for the state. One of the key tools that we use to kind of spread the message of opportunity around Maine's forest bioeconomy was our first ever public summit, which took place in April. We hosted a virtual summit. Over 300 people attended from across Maine, the United States, and internationally. And the topic was forwarding the future of Maine's forest bioeconomy. For those of you who attended, thanks. If you want to revisit any of the material, it's available online. For anyone who's curious about what they missed, all of the presentations are available on formaine.org, and this list of topics shows the diversity of presentations that were covered on that day. So understanding kind of how we've been working to mainstream and integrate the forest economy into state planning, we know that we've built a lot of momentum within the effort. We know this because we see the success within the committee's work and within the communities we work with, and we also know this because we get regular requests to share this model of industry cooperation and organization across the country and internationally as well. So we've consulted with other states in the US and jurisdictions in Canada on the Maine approach as other spaces seek to emulate what we've created in Maine. So knowing that this momentum stands behind us, we are excited to pursue phase 3 of the initiative. So you'll remember phase 1 was research, setting the vision and roadmap. Phase 2, which we're in now, is about implementing recommendations from the research. And phase 3 will move to further focusing and refining the effort and continuing implementation in areas of strategic importance. So specifically, that looks like market attraction, workforce, small woodland owner outreach and engagement, and communications, as well as deepening our community's work. So I'll talk a little bit about these committee reports before I pass things over to Jeff. So as I mentioned, strategic investment attraction is at the very center of this work. Jeff will go deeper in just a moment into what their work has looked like. We will say one of the primary achievements of the market attraction work has been the establishment of a working group that works on investment attraction activities in partnership with DECD, the University of Maine, Maine & Company, and Maine Forest Products Council to assess prospects for investment and to seek out new leads and recruit those leads to take a look at Maine, all while using the research and data from Maine's committees to support investment attraction activities. So Jeff will talk more about that. In succession, the emerging technology work further enables market attraction by really ensuring that we have our eyes on the landscape of new product development and research and development opportunities. So our emerging technologies work is led by the University of Maine with industry partnerships and community partnerships, as well as participation from DECD's Office of Business Development. And this committee continues to assess new technologies as they emerge and determine if they're a good fit for Maine and if they're ready for serious pursuit from folks in the state. Workforce Development Committee, we know, we've heard a lot today, that the future success of the industry hinges on having a skilled and available workforce. So the Workforce Development Committee has worked with the University of Southern Maine to assess workforce demand, labor pools, recruitment strategies, and training programs within the forest products economy. We worked with Ryan Wallace of the Center for Business and Economic Research and his team, and they helped us develop a strategy to address workforce in the forest products economy, in addition to providing some real tangible forecasts of need for replacement workers in the sector. So their full report is available online, but I'll say that where we're going with this in the Workforce Committee is really leaning into projects on educational connections, illuminating and developing career pathways, and focusing on industry partnerships for opportunities like apprenticeships and internships. Just this past week, we closed our request for information on developing curriculum materials for K through 12 education to pique interest and curiosity around the forest products economy and possible careers in the industry. Small Woodlot Owner Committee is another one that's deepened its work over the past year. So we worked with the Center for Nonprofit Strategies, which runs a project called the Tools for Engaging Landowners Effectively. They worked across the country to understand the needs of small woodland owners and the kinds of messaging and outreach that can be effective in engaging them more deeply with their woodlots. So from the research in this committee, the report also published on our website, we're looking at strategies that increase outreach and engagement, as well as educate forestry professionals, including service foresters, loggers, wildlife professionals, with information they need to really connect with landowners that have been historically difficult to reach or persuade to be active in their woodlots. This specific category of landowner is called woodland retreat owner. The profile of that owner is there, and a lot of really interesting stuff about small shifts in the way that we approach a landowner and how those shifts over time can lead to real change in management. So for this committee, we're looking at developing a professional development credit for forest industry professionals that train them on these approaches and strategies, and developing a hub for landowner resources where landowners themselves can come to connect to a central hub on options for managing their land. The communications effort is one that is perennially important and we keep hearing enthusiasm about. This is really just an opportunity to amplify what's happening in the industry and be in control of the story about the place that Maine's forest economy has in the future of the state. This right now looks like social media campaign, a new website. We're currently developing a series of videos, and we hope that in phase 3 of the work, this will continue to expand. There's so much good work in this industry that is largely hidden from the public eye for no other reason than, someone's not out there really trumpeting the story. So that's what we're seeking to do in this effort. And then lastly, I'll talk about communities. So we've been doing some really deep thinking and work within communities across the state that either lost a mill or are seeing shifts in forest products within their communities. And currently where we've arrived is a number of projects that seek to build capacity and assess need at the local level. So I want to just mention the 3 things that we notice and we hear across communities. There's, of course, the list is endless in terms of both what communities have to offer and where they're seeking assistance, but some central points include housing, capacity, and general just revitalization support to the downtown areas. So the Communities Committee is approaching those 3 needs through the strategy of the committee, which includes working with housing consultants to determine specific housing needs and opportunities to conduct studies that can spur private development, particularly related to workforce or affordable housing. We're also working with Maine Downtown Center and the Institute for Civic Leadership, which are both programs run by MDF. We're working with them in partnership to provide basic downtown revitalization support to the communities in which we work. And the Institute for Civic Leadership is offering the opportunity for folks in our 4 Maine communities to participate in leadership development training. The goal there is to unlock some of the capacity that already exists in these communities in terms of talent and really give folks a boost that they need to solve some of the capacity challenges on the ground. So that's it for the committee update and where we're situated. I'm happy to answer questions after we hear from Jeff, but again, we'll just say thank you to all of you that have been involved. It has been continually impressive to me as a program director to see Zoom rooms just full of folks again and again who are eager to be there and eager to see this industry pivot and adjust to remain relevant and to grow into the future. So thank you all. We'll hear from Jeff next. I believe, Jeff, can you still hear us? Are you still there?
I'm here. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak. today, and a sincere thanks to Pat and his team for allowing me to do this virtually. I hope you've all had a good day. I know that you've had a long day, so being the last presenters of I'll try to keep this informative and useful for you. So my name is Jeffrey Hatcher. I'm the Managing Director of Indufor North America, and I run the Washington, D.C. team, and we have been working with Maine for several of those years in a really collaborative and excellent working relationship with the Maine committee, with Bree and with Pat, so very pleased to be presenting what we've been working on the past couple of years. So Bree, do you want to advance to the next slide?
Go for it.
So today I'll just cover a few topics. One is a little bit more detail on the project we've been working on with you. The second is progress to date on the investment attraction efforts, and then wrap it up with some international perspectives from our point of view as a global consulting company in the forest industry on what we think is relevant to attracting new investment into the state of Maine. And as Bree mentioned, aligning that investment with the current industry that exists. So you can go to the next slide, or two over. There we go. So the Indufor Group, just so you don't know, in case you don't know, we have 4 offices around the world, and all of our offices have been involved in this project with you over the past several years in some respect. We have someone in our team in New Zealand named Marcel, who came to Maine several times during the previous project, and also we've been leveraging our team in Australia. We've been in business for more than 40 years, and we do work across the forest industry value chain, including work all the way on the, I guess you could say, the left side of the spectrum with conservation organizations and NGOs, to the other end of the spectrum, which would be timberland and asset valuation and investment advisory. We have a stronger expertise in wood products markets than we do pulp and paper, just so you understand where to situate us. If you could go to the next slide, please. As Bree mentioned, we did work with Maine in 2018 and 2019 to do a global market analysis and benchmarking study. The results of that work, which was a very collaborative effort, was to identify several product markets that we wanted to focus on in terms of attracting new investment into the state. So the conclusion of the analysis was that we should, Maine as an entity and as a group in Maine, should focus on dissolving pulp, nanocellulose, LVL, cross-laminated timber, MDF, cellulosic sugars, and pyrolysis oil as opportunities in the international market where Maine could excel because of your resource base, your workforce, and different aspects of the research and development that is being undertaken at the University of Maine. We've begun a second project with you all last year. We started this project right at the beginning of the COVID lockdowns in March, and it's divided into 4 phases, which are distinct from the 4 main phases. But the first phase from our perspective was to assess and analyze your previous work, because there was a gap in our interactions with you all, and then to analyze incentives and how other jurisdictions or regions in the world were successful in attracting investment into these 7 product markets. So I'll explain a little bit what we found there. And then we built out a working relationship with Maine and Maine and Company and the University of Maine over that part of the project to develop how we would work together in terms of marketing Maine internationally and around North America. And in the second phase, we prepared marketing materials and strategies, which I'll show you a little bit of, which are for the most part available online on the Maine website. And then the last phase, which we have called phases 3 and 4, we've been actively looking for new investors. And Indufor has a pretty deep bench of industry experts and clients. So we've been targeting mostly those types of organizations or businesses that have a very established commercial presence for the investment outreach. You go to the next slide, please. Next 2, basically. So the first part of our project was to do what we call the stocktaking analysis. And we looked around the world and we said, which jurisdictions in the world have successfully attracted investment over the past several years, and the products that Maine is interested in. We highlighted a few cases that we wanted to profile and learn about, and I'll share some of the findings. This report is on the For Maine website. There's a very detailed analysis and a case study for each of these line items you see here, where you can learn about the jurisdiction or about the company and why they made their investment where they did. We were looking primarily in established markets. So in Europe, we looked in Finland and the Netherlands. In Finland, we looked at nanocellulose, dissolving pulp, pyrolysis oil, and LVL. In the Netherlands, we looked at pyrolysis oil. In Australia, we looked at an LVL manufacturer that expanded its operations. And then in Canada, we looked at nanocellulose, dissolving pulp, and CLT investments. And lastly, in the United States, we looked at several states. We looked at Oregon, Arkansas, Minnesota, North Carolina, California, and South Carolina, and pretty much covered most of the products there. And we were trying to understand, what did the state do or the town do to make sure that an investment would come to their location and how they can make them successful. We also tried to understand some of the failures. So we do have some cases here where an investment was made, but it failed. And so what are the lessons that can be learned from Maine? Obviously, an investment in anything related to forestry is quite sizable in terms of CapEx. It's also a longer term play than many other industries. So making intelligent choices up front about who you're trying to target to come into your state, we think is very vital. Go to the next slide, please. So organizing those cases, we've just pulled out a few lessons that we'll share with you. So looking around at the more traditional wood products like mass timber construction, LVL, and MDF, we found some, we think, useful lessons learned from Maine. So mass timber is not an established market yet, but it is a solid wood product. And therefore, there is quite a lot of benefit to R&D in the state, which you have at the University of Maine, and also support testing and certification to get mass timber either used in the state or manufactured in the state. And incentives in the cases where there was CLT investment really were not major, but they were provision of land or buildings or some infrastructure improvements. And every public dollar is very precious. So identifying ways that a jurisdiction can incentivize investment without spending all of the public resources was part of how we were looking at these lessons. So in that respect, LVL, the cases that we identified in Finland and the United States, there wasn't much public support from the government to get the investment. There's a strong market pull to pull the investment into the state. For MDF and particle board, these are very exacting types of investments. They're large scale. The site characteristics, the resource availability is paramount. And there is a very strong case for private investment in these markets. So this is not a place where we thought public resources really need to be dedicated that much. On the other hand, if you look at new products like nanocellulose, which is an emerging product, public investment through R&D is really important, as is finding partnerships between a company and research facilities and the manufacturers that produce residuals that can be used to produce nanocellulose. And so support from the public or from an entity like For Maine that focuses on marketing and strategic ventures or identifying off-takers or export opportunities is really important, even beyond potentially cash or grants to a company. Dissolving pulp has a much larger market. It's a very significant investment to either put in a dissolving pulp mill or retrofit an existing pulp and paper mill to make dissolving pulp. But there's quite a lot of lessons to be learned, we think, from one case in Quebec, which was Fortress Dissolving Pulp, where there was a tremendous amount of public investment and support and loan guarantees issued by the government of Quebec to get the manufacturer in place. And due to some issues beyond their control related to the price of dissolving pulp in the market and other issues, the whole venture failed. And so we, considering that case carefully, I think is really important in terms of where Maine puts its energy to attract investment. On On the other hand, in Finland, where there is a little bit more holistic support for the industry, market dynamics has really driven the conversion of the pulp mills into dissolving pulp. And there was some years ago public investment in the technology and research organizations, but for some of the recent conversions to dissolving pulp, it was just a pure commercial decision by the company. And the last two products we looked at are fuel products, or chemicals and fuels products. Cellulosic sugars is a catch-all term for many products that can be made from the sugars of a tree. And so a lot of important investment comes in R&D. But for some products, there is a good market. For others, it's not yet clear why you would want to use ligno, woody biomass versus potentially other sources of cellulose to produce the chemical. And for companies that are interested in this, they're usually interested in marketing themselves as a green or as a carbon-friendly company. Therefore, really emphasizing Maine's sustainability of the resource is important to attract those types of investors. The last product is pyrolysis oil, which can be a drop-in replacement for home heating fuel, for example, which we know is used in Maine. Part of the issue to attract investment is making sure that there's enough offtake for someone to invest in a pyrolysis oil manufacturing facility. So if you think about provision, you think about requirements of public buildings in Maine or the universities to use pyrolysis oil, that could be a significant enough driver to make the investment worthwhile for a manufacturer. If you go to the next slide, please. So distilling it all again, what were the key drivers behind the investment in these products? The first one, and where we think Maine is very well placed, it's the resource availability. We know that you have trees, and that the modeling that you've done in the state shows that over the next several decades, you'll have a good supply of woody biomass. And so that's a key factor for all of these investments. The second most important factor was existing infrastructure. We know that Maine has many mills that are idle, that are looking for conversion, or you have existing facilities that would be interested in co-locating other revenue generating opportunities on their site or nearby. The third most important feature was R&D partnerships, which is important for many of the emerging products, and the university that you have there, the several universities you have there, but in particular University of Maine and their technology teams there are really world-class and also important to developing partnerships with private industry. Then market access, which is really important for the larger, harder to transport products, but less so for nanocellulose, for example, or products that have a very immediate market in the region. And then we'll kind of tied for second to last place is financing. The smaller startup companies need access to financing and lenders or equity investors that understand the market, and less so, the larger opportunities where it's easier for a bank or for an investor to understand the market potential for a product. Go to the next slide, please. So we use that stocktaking analysis to inform our marketing approach. You'll see here two documents we produce. One is a brochure called Invest in Maine's Growing Forest Bioeconomy, and the other is what we call a pitch deck that we're using to market Maine. You'll notice that we are very explicitly positioning Maine within the forest bioeconomy. I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail subsequently. But we've had, we think, a good interactive process to produce these materials for Maine, and also some communication professionals in Maine. And we've been using these for the past 4 or 5 months in our outreach to our client base and beyond. We've had a good reception so far, and I'll show you just a couple slides. So one is, if you go to the next slide, this is just an example of what's inside those pitch decks, but we're trying to dimension for our audience what Maine can provide in terms of the bioeconomy. Maine has a tremendous forest base that provides biomass, but it also provides climate and flood control, and it provides recreation and aesthetic opportunities. But there's also quite a lot of harvesting. and that harvesting can contribute to manufacturing of lumber, of panels, pulp, as you've historically done very strongly in Maine, but also providing residuals that can go into biorefinery or power and heat generation. So this is just an example of us positioning Maine within this bioeconomy optic, which we think is very relevant to international markets right now. Go to the next slide. Again, this is from the pitch deck. This provides some of a quick snapshot of why we think Maine's an attractive place to invest today. The key issues are the resource sustainability, the millions of acres of hard and softwood that you have, your unique landowning structure. I think it's important to note that Maine has a very interesting and comparatively special landownership structure compared to other places in the United States or around the world. That you have the highest percentage of certified forests in the United States, and that you produce a lot of wood products that do create a lot of residuals. And we understand that today that's a problem for the industry, but hopefully in the future that's an opportunity. We're also emphasizing the market access that you have in Maine, being so close to New England, or being part of New England and being so close to so many people, and really a huge economy, $1.2 trillion GDP economy in New England. That's larger than most countries outside the United States. And the 75 million people that live near Maine. Your infrastructure today is really robust, and it's improving over time. The road network that you have and the private road network we think is particularly relevant for people to understand that they might not immediately grasp. For example, an investor from Finland or Germany, they're not so familiar with this type of infrastructure. The financing environment that you're in, the long history that you have with the industry provides a really knowledgeable sector to invest into. You have good R&D partnerships, and you have a really strong workforce. And we know that's one of the key reasons that Maine exists, is to generate jobs for people in Maine. And so we want to highlight that you have a trained and skilled workforce, and that there are opportunities to increasingly upskill your professionals in Maine that might not be familiar today with producing CLT, but that can very easily learn going forward. Go to the next slide, please. One of the other things we produced was an interactive guide to Maine's forest economy. This is available on the website, and the reason we produced this was partly because of COVID. We wanted to provide an easy way for investors all around the world to understand what Maine offers in a bit more detail than an informational pamphlet can offer. So we integrated the research produced by Maine into an easy-to-use database that overlays roads, that overlays harvest forecasts, and many other aspects. So someone can sit in their living room in Estonia and learn a lot about Millinocket very quickly. And that helps us, when we speak to them, get up to speed very quickly. In the past, people would travel more freely to come visit, and so we wanted to replace that in the near term with this database. And we, just so you know, we track usage on this database, and there are about 20 to 40 unique visitors a month. So obviously it's not Facebook, but we think that's a decent traffic considering the number of people we're speaking to and the number of people that might be interested in learning more about Maine's forest economy. Go to the next slide. So just a quick snapshot of the lessons learned. We at Indufor, in this project, we have focused on the large players. So we are really talking to the companies that have healthy balance sheets, that operate multiple facilities in different locations, and have the potential, if they were to make an investment in Maine, that's meaningful in terms of jobs and investments and getting you closer to that $12 billion target that you have. That means we're excluding a lot of smaller firms from our outreach, and it means more likely that the conversion of a lead that we generate into an actual investment will take a bit longer. But so far, we've been really pleased with the reception we've received. Part of the process has been to interact with industry representatives through Maine, and that has been extremely valuable. When we have someone we want to speak with, we can pass them on to Maine, have a deep dive into wood harvesting or how wood is priced in Maine. And that, we think, fosters a lot of trust between potential investor and the state. And by the same token, 4 Maine committee members have played an important role in that dialogue. 2 persistent questions come up when we speak to potential investors, and they have to do with the wood prices being a bit higher in Maine than in other places in the United States, and what to do with residuals currently. The last point in terms of lessons learned is there's been a lot of interaction between Maine and Finland, which we find as a Finnish company to be extremely wonderful, but we know that there's other opportunities for Maine beyond Finland. So we've been focused a lot more outside of Finland in our investment attraction than within Finland, because there is a good dialogue between Maine and Finland currently, including an MOU between the governor and the Minister of Agriculture, I think, in Finland. Go to the next slide. I've got just 2 more slides and then let you get on for your afternoon. Pat asked me to kind of look around the world and what's important out there today, and therefore I'd like to present 5 issues that we think are relevant to Maine's investment attraction. The first is the shift to the bioeconomy. It sounds like a new term, but we think that it's a really important way to present Maine. The EU, for example, has a bioeconomy strategy. A lot of the companies that you know of in Finland or Germany, for example, are repositioning themselves as biomaterials or biofuels and chemicals company. And we'd like to make sure that what we're doing for Maine does that in a way that's sensible. We know that it's a long path to become a fully integrated bioeconomy, but that informs who we're looking to speak with. We're looking to speak with companies that have that vision, that would be able to nest into Maine's economy, and also provide, for example, opportunities for co-location or other ways to add value to the existing industry. But it's really important, if we're going to do that, to focus on the sustainability of the forest resource and open other partnerships with other states when the market in Maine, for example, for pyrolysis oil might be too small. The second key issue is the COVID recovery. You've all gone through a lot of ups and downs related to COVID. So is the rest of the world. 2020 for our clients was a time of strategic reflection and planning. But now in 2021, we're seeing a lot of movement. We think it's important to note that there is a lot of COVID recovery potentially available for the forest sector in Maine, but there is also, similarly in other jurisdictions, other places, a lot of money available, particularly for what they are calling smart forestry or for mill upgrades. And just a couple examples, Germany is allocating 700 million euros, it's about $1 billion, to forestry as part of their COVID recovery. And so we think really being smart about the deployment of your recovery funds to attract long-term investors will be really important. So that investment screen, the emerging tech committee can provide, make sure a company is really technologically sound, and also some of the intelligence we can gather for you about whether or not a company has the financial health to stay in Maine for a long time. But at the same time, you should recognize that competition for every investment dollar is very strong right now. And so Maine has the potential to attract investment for sure, but there are other jurisdictions that are using public money to attract or upgrade existing infrastructure and industry. The third issue, and I'm sure you just heard a lot about this from the previous speakers, has to do with wood prices. They're soaring in Europe. Supply chains are struggling to meet demand for machinery, for mill upgrades or new mills. There are some upgrades underway in Germany, Finland, Sweden, China, and Russia in particular that we think are important to know about. Central Europe is growing very strongly, with its mills growing more than 6% per year on average. And that China is a major player in Russia and New Zealand, where we have a lot of activity. And that on the horizon, there'll be changes to the potential supply of wood coming out of Canada and Russia. So the implications for Maine is we think that it's a good time to be in Maine, that eyes are on North America and Russia to meet demand for wood. Europe isn't at a place today to meet the current demand, we think. And though wood prices in Maine are higher than the US Southeast, Maine is very competitive compared to Europe at the moment. A lot of our clients are paying 3 or 4 times per cubic meter what you'd pay in Maine currently. And so for our purposes, we're going to target Germany, Austria, Russia, and China a little bit more directly going forward as potential markets to market Maine for investment by entities that are located there. We're also targeting other countries in Central Europe. The last 2 points, just to wrap it up. The first is climate change mitigation is a real opportunity for the forest sector. There's increasingly strong political support for mass timber, which can be a contributor to climate solutions by storing and sequestering carbon, but particularly for commercial uses. We think this is where the market is really strong. 2 indicators here. One is the fiscal year. This is within the United States, but the National Defense Authorization Act is just one indicator for you where each branch of the military is tasked with commissioning at least one pilot CLT facility in order to comply with the Act in 2022. In Europe, that we've seen the expansion of private equity investment funds targeting solely mass timber construction. So we think that is an important driver of investment, and they're typically positioning themselves as a carbon or as a climate solution. There's a lot of interest in biofuels and chemicals. There's still hurdles to reach the market size that is potential. And a lot of asset managers, like big banks that you might have heard of, like JP Morgan, are positioning themselves to grow it into the forestry business in order to provide offsets, carbon offsets to clients. So there's a lot of activity in the climate change mitigation world right now. We think Maine needs to continue to highlight its sustainability track record. We know that the prize right now is a CLT manufacturing facility, so we're really focused a lot of our attention on those companies that could put in a CLT manufacturing facility in Maine. Your governor has an international profile as a leader on climate change, and so we're also making sure that that's well known. Maine's climate policy and climate council is, a leader in the United States, and therefore for companies that might be based in Europe where they have high regulatory hurdles in terms of complying with climate regulations, we want them to know that Maine's a place that they can come do business and comply with their obligations. And that brings me to the last point, which is environmental concerns. And I'll give you 2 anecdotes. The first is the EU forest strategy. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the EU has put out a forest strategy, and it's extremely controversial in Europe because it includes wood products as a product that complies with the climate change and carbon mitigation strategy in Europe. So for our friends in Finland, for example, where they would like to see more investment in wood pellets, we expect that to be kind of a controversial issue for the next coming couple of years. And therefore, we think that the market for some of the products that currently comply with the EU, what's called the EU taxonomy, might change because of the political sensitivity of this issue. The second aspect is there's just a lot of environmental concerns right now because climate change is affecting how trees are growing and pest outbreaks, for example, in Europe, where there's quite a lot of damage due to beetle infestation in Central Europe and in Germany in particular. So you see changes to how large manufacturing facilities are, and also improved resource sustainability standards being imposed. And again, from the EU perspective, this is really important. There's a new regulation that's likely to come out in the next couple of years in the EU to, for example, trace the environmental footprint and deforestation footprint, for example, of commodities coming into the EU and having a track and trace system. So we think all of these things combined mean that Maine really needs to focus on some of the long-term value-added products like CLT and be a little bit careful with some of the potential risks out there for products that currently comply with EU regulations, but then the future might not, for example, wood pellets. So thanks for listening. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. I'm happy to take some questions and fill in the gaps. I know we went through a lot of materials.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you. So it seems like the best way to do questions, because Jeff can hear me, but maybe not all of you, is if you have a question, you can just say it loudly and I'll try and restate it. Oh, microphone, Roberta. Okay, we have a question. Is China buying more wood than normal from Russia currently?
Yes, I think it is, and it's really the main driver right now, I think, in investments in Russia. They're also buying a lot from New Zealand, and I think one of the questions will be, Russia is imposing very soon a ban on softwood, roundwood exports. And so the question will be, well, what replaces that supply to China? Russia's doing that to promote investment in manufacturing. But in the near term, they might look to other places like the United States or New Zealand that can provide ready access to roundwood for processing.
Thank you. What else? Anything else for Jeff or myself? Jim Robbins wants to know if you have any MDF manufacturers lined up to come here.
Yeah, I wish I could say we have a bunch, but we've had actually difficult reception with MDF manufacturers. We have had better reception with wood products, engineered wood products manufacturers currently. But we will keep you informed. And just so you all know, we work with a committee comprised of the University of Maine, Maine and Company, and we share all the leads and information with them, and then they report out to For Maine. In order to maintain some confidentiality, but no, we have not been successful yet on MDF, but we'll keep trying. That is really part of our push in this next phase.
Thank you. Anything else? Thanks. Which 7 kind of broad product categories represented the biggest opportunity for Maine?
Yeah, when we did the market analysis, we thought dissolving pulp would be a really important opportunity for Maine because of your existing supply lines and pulp manufacturing facilities. But the more we look into it, we think that the wood products like LVL, CLT are likely to be more feasible and therefore kind of more attractive in aggregation. One big dissolving pulp mill would be difficult to situate currently in Maine, given the volumes coming out. Because a dissolving pulp mill, if you were to have a new one versus a retrofitted one, you'd be really putting a lot of strain on the resource base, from what we can tell. We think also, just the number of sawmills you have in the state and the residuals coming off, there's good opportunities for some of the smaller players to come in and use them. But, really to generate jobs and longer term investment, we think there's still new products, but we call them kind of the more traditional sawnwood products or engineered mass timber products.
Anything else?
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff and Bree. And